Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod and this is Star Wars 7x7, your daily dose of Star Wars joy. And thank you so much for joining me for it. And thank you especially to the people who make this possible for you with their support at patreon.com/SW7x7. So we're in the middle of a rewatch of Season 1 of The Acolyte. Yeah, maybe a little early, but it's all fresh in our minds and we get to make connections across all of the episodes that might be a little harder to make if we had waited a year to do this until another season happens. Fingers crossed for that. But in the meantime, we're talking about episode 5, which is Night, which features the big reveal of the mysterious stranger as Qimir, aka Darth Qimir, aka whatever you want to call him. He says he has no name, right? But you might call him Sith, as the Jedi would. So we'll start in no particular order with May, and I had a little bit of confusion when I initially watched the season because May seems to do something a bit puzzling. In episode 4, she says she's going to turn herself into the Jedi Order and thinks that everything will be fine because she can give them information on the existence of a Sith running around, right? But here in episode 5, the moment Jecki attacks her, she doesn't say, "Hey Jecki, I know there's a Sith around, like here, arrest me and I'll tell you everything you need to know." No, she actually tries to fight Jecki to the death. And I think now that I've had a chance to sit with the season, the reason that this is the case is I think May, upon realizing that the stranger was there on Kofar, realized that she was in some serious trouble. She knew from Qimir that turning herself in, that the stranger would kill her, and she had very little hope for all of those Jedi to be able to survive, and it turns out she was right. And the only way she was going to survive, or so she thought, I think, was that she just got out of Dodge, and that meant having to fight Jecki to be able to get away, because Jecki was not going to let her just walk away and escape, knowing, of course, that she's responsible for the murders of Indara and Torben. Not necessarily Kelnaka, though it was an easy mistake to make. And speaking of those murders and the vendetta, this really does raise the question with the reveal of Qimir. Why does Qimir have any particular skin in this game, right? You could make the case one way that he wanted a pupil, he wanted an acolyte, and to have that person be able to prove that they were worthy of being an acolyte, you would need to give them some kind of task, some kind of test, and that test could involve, in May's particular case, killing the 4 Jedi that were responsible for everything that happened on Brendok. But how did the two of them actually meet? I mean, on one hand, in the previous episode, Qimir says, you know how he is, he collects people, and it seems like he's talking about his stranger persona, not necessarily about Darth Plagueis. But then there's the whole thing about Qimir's eyes going black when Osha puts on the helmet later on in the series, and so it does seem to suggest the possibility, as we talked about in yesterday's episode, of some kind of connection Qimir might have with the Witches of Brendok as well. In which case, he might have his own particular stake in the deaths of these Jedi, and maybe it's possible that Plagueis wanted him to do that. But as Saul mentions, or brings up, why risk discovery? Like, what is going on at this particular point in the timeline that made Qimir decide, okay, yeah, we gotta risk discovery to do this, and made him get May into action and make her kill all these Jedi and risk discovery that way? Even though, there is the flippant, like, well, I was wearing a mask, right? Like, that's a good deflection, but it really doesn't answer the question. It's not that he didn't think that he would get discovered. It's, it is a bigger question that remains to be answered. And as far as Qimir and Saul and how they interact with each other, right? First of all, it's interesting that Qimir was going to kill Osha, and it was Saul that actually protected her, so that has obviously implications down the line in the series. But Saul and Qimir, first, Qimir is like, yeah, you don't recognize me or you don't know me. And Saul's like, I sense something familiar. And that probably has to do with them meeting in episode 2. But, I do wonder, considering that we find out later that Qimir was one of Vernestra's Padawans. But, he is actually like, in real life, Manny Jacinto is, I believe, 35 or 36 years old. He's 10 years older than Amandla Stenberg. So, the fact that Osha does not remember anybody like Qimir in the Jedi Order, and Qimir later on suggests that he, it was a real long time ago, basically. But that does kind of suggest that there's a possibility that Qimir was in the Jedi Order when Saul was coming up. Then there's Saul's line about what kind of master hides his face from his apprentice, and Chimir's response is, "You tell me," which of course is a reference to all the things that Saul hasn't told Osha. And, I think it probably should have been obvious by now, but clearly May has told Qimir everything about what happened on Brendok, and we don't know it yet at this point as we're watching through, but that would include the fact that May watched Saul kill Mother Anastasia. And that's certainly what he's referring to when Osha tells Saul, to stop and not kill Qimir, right? Or just, says his name, right, to get him to stop. And Qimir says, you trust him after everything that's happened? And that, of course, is a reference to it, but, clearly Osha doesn't know at this point what it is. And, Saul is still hiding that particular secret, even though he's already told us he's going to tell her. But Qimir refers to Saul's darkness in that, says, I, accept my darkness. What have you done with yours? And I don't know if that's actually accurate. And it might be just a taunt, considering that Qimir knows what Saul's deep, dark secret is. But Saul's secret does not really stem from a darkness. And maybe he has regrets about what happened. I mean, it seems like he does, but ultimately he makes it very clear in the last episode that he still thinks that the Jedi did the right thing in trying to get May away from the witches, and definitely getting Osha away from the witches. So in that sense, I don't think there's necessarily a darkness in Saul. There's certainly, a difficulty, right? There's definitely problems with his emotions, with his, level of attachment, and, things of that nature. But yeah, not a darkness, certainly in the way Qimir means it. The other thing I want to flag is a little thing about power, in the sense that Qimir says that May has always been weak just before he cuts her handcuffs apart. But in this particular way, what he's really referring to, I think, is more about her commitment, right? May definitely wants to, kill these Jedi, wants revenge, but really what she wants is to be reunited with her sister. And so her commitment to the dark side isn't there, and really kind of hasn't been all along, it seems. She just has a very limited, yes, I would like to set the scales of justice right, basically, but I don't want to go around doing crazy things like you do, apparently, according, to what she thinks Qimir is doing. Meanwhile, Osha is starting to rediscover her power. She feels Jecki passing in the Force when Qimir kills her. She finds her voice in telling Saul not to kill Qimir because that would not be the Jedi way. And she also has a very strong feeling about, a sense of justice and wanting May to pay for her crimes. And so, yeah, tries to arrest her, the citizen's arrest, if you will, at the end of the episode. Obviously, that scenario doesn't go well for Osha because she gets knocked out by May. And so here we have another case of Osha asleep. So she was asleep and woke up at the beginning of this episode, and then she gets knocked out and is out cold at the end of the episode. And Qimir finds her and tenderly puts his cloak over her. And his line about what extraordinary beings we are, and then, in the revelation of our triumph, you see the depths of our despair. So, yeah, that really does feel like he's talking about how amazing it was that he was actually seen by the Jedi and he killed 7 Jedi. It's a pretty amazing thing for him, right? That's revelation and triumph, but the depth of despair is that he has lost the person that he thought was going to be his pupil, his acolyte. He is all about the power of 2, and yeah, now he's just alone and bereft, and he has no idea whether Osha is going to be the replacement person at this point, but yeah, he at least can bring her and see what happens basically next. And that line about extraordinary beings is also kind of interesting because in the Darth Plagueis novel by James Luceno, there's a conversation that Plagueis and Palpatine have, and Palpatine says that he doesn't want to be ordinary, and Plagueis says, oh, so you want to be extraordinary. Specifically, Plagueis says to Palpatine, do you fancy yourself extraordinary? And Palpatine says, I only meant that I want to live an extraordinary life. And the last thing I'll say is that as I was watching this with my son, not only does Qimir disappear once when he knocks Saul for a loop and then suddenly he's gone, and then when he cuts Kelnaka's saber in half and Jecki's looking at it kind of stupefied, and then she looks up and he's gone again, my son says, why is he Batman? That was his reaction to the disappearance of Qimir on multiple occasions, pulling his little stunt like he does in The Dark Knight, for example, when Gordon turns away, or Harvey Dent turns away, and suddenly he's not there anymore and they're still talking to him. And I thought that was funny, so I thought I would share it with you. And that's what I've got in our deeper dive on the rewatch of Night, which is episode 5 of The Acolyte. That is going to do it for this episode of the podcast. If you enjoy the show, please help me get it in front of more people who might enjoy this particular dose of Star Wars joy. You can do that by just telling people. You can do that by telling algorithms with your ratings and reviews, your likes and your comments, your follows and subscribes and joins. And you can even help me as an independent creator continue to produce this podcast, and you can learn more about that at patreon.com/SW7X7. And it just remains for me to say thank you so much for joining me for this episode, as always, and may the Force be with you, wherever in the world you may be.
7x7 is not endorsed or sponsored yet by Lucasfilm Limited, Disney, or 20th Century Fox, and is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Star Wars, the Star Wars logo, all names and pictures of Star Wars characters, vehicles, and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Lucasfilm Limited, or their respective trademark and copyright holders. May the Force be with them. All original content is copyright by Star Wars 7x7. We hope you love it.